I'm Naya, mom, boob nerd, board-certified lactation consultant, and lover of lipstick and curse words. I'm that weird Indian girl you knew in high school, all grown up.
And I'm Alexis, mom, birth nerd, and therapist plus doula, encouraging parents to hold joy plus what the fuck is this mess simultaneously. Some people think I'm too much, but those aren't my people. And we are the Top Knot Squad. TKS is a tiny little podcast about motherhood in real life, the good, the bad, the ugly AF.
Hosted by two women that are passionate about our beliefs and unafraid to speak our minds.
Friends that wanted to create space for all that ish we are too scared to talk about.
Are you ready to laugh, be vulnerable, and keep it real with us?
Top knots are not required.
If the Top Knot Squad content makes you laugh, nod in agreement, or makes you feel less alone, we'd love your support in the cost of producing this podcast. Visit patreon.com/TopKnotSquad to learn more about our budget-friendly sponsorship tiers and how you can help ensure that TKS has a future. Every little bit helps.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing a heavy topic. When do we not? Today, we're going to be talking about the loss of a child. The loss of a child is generally considered the worst possible grief and a topic that is often ignored because of the immense pain involved. We are grateful to have our friend and colleague, Kim Borchert, on the show today to share with us some of her story and to help us bring more awareness on navigating grief as a parent. We know the grieving process is a very individual and personal experience, but we hope Kim can help us understand more about the grieving parent. Please listen with an open heart, but also take the space you may need. Kim is the wife to a pretty amazing man and mom of 6, 5 on Earth and 1 beyond. She has been an unapologetic normalizer of death since her daughter died in 2003. She is a childbirth educator and birth and postpartum doula that specializes in helping families navigate grief, loss, and welcoming their rainbow babies. She owns Austin Doula Care with her doula soulmate and is so grateful for the opportunity to serve Austin families and collaborate with other doulas in Austin. She is a lover of plants, herbs, and making food and medicines from her garden. When she's not doing doula work or playing in the dirt, you can find Kim swimming with her kiddos, reading a book, or watching Outlander. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We're excited to have you today.
So
we just love you. That's all I wanted to say. I'm going to fangirl for a moment. Kim Borchert fangirl over here. We're so happy that you're here.
I love you guys so much.
We were actually in our previous episode, we're talking about creating your mom village. Mm-hmm. And we talked about how you need mom friends that aren't just in your stage. Like you need some that are further along. And you're definitely one of those for me. So you offer wisdom of what's to come.
Yeah, it's so important. Yeah. I had a client one time say it was like looking around the corner, peeking around the corner of what's to come. I'm like, yeah, it is. Mm-hmm. I was lucky when I got married. I had 14 nieces and nephews.
Wow.
So I had that in my family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, my oldest nephew just turned 29.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been an aunt since I was 13. And so everybody do the math, you know how old I am. So I was really lucky that I always had that village around me of seeing what was happening and what was coming. And so now it's really important to me to offer that village to other people. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad I can be part of that for you.
Thank you. And now Kim is support and proximity. We also talked about that.
Yes.
How you need actual proximity for it to work.
Very much so.
It's a 15-minute drive to Alexis's house.
Perfect.
I know.
Yay.
And I get to pass my favorite garden center. So it's really nice.
Which one is it?
Red Barn Garden Center.
I keep seeing that. I told Ben he should take his mom. She's a gardener.
Yeah. It's lovely. And they've just moved. So they're going to have a newer, like a better, bigger location over in Crystal Falls. But right now they're temporary.
Nice.
But I can find herbs that I normally wouldn't be able to find other places, like yarrow and calendula and, elder, all the things. I'm going to grow elderberries, and I can make you elderberry syrup all the time.
I need it.
Yeah.
Well, let's start by you sharing what you feel comfortable sharing about your story.
Sure. So it all starts in 2001 when I got married. It's interesting. So my husband and I grew up Mormon, and we are not anymore, but that was our life for many, many years. And in the Mormon faith, you get married and you have babies, and that's just what it is. So we met. Well, no, we didn't meet. We had our first date in June of 2001. We got married in October of 2001.
Whoa.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then we got pregnant in April of 2002. So 6 months after we got married, we were pregnant with our first baby. And of course, we were over the moon. We had no idea how we were going to pay for this. He was an undergrad. We got married his junior year of undergrad, and I was a sign language interpreter in the elementary school district, like elementary school. And so we get pregnant because you just do. Like, I don't know how we're going to pay for it, but we will. I'm not worried about it. And Emma was born December 15th, 2002. She was due January 3rd. So 37 weeks and 3 days. My water broke. Sunday night, sitting down to watch Alias. And my water broke. And it was the Sunday before finals week of his senior year. Oh, no. So that was super fun.
Yeah.
And we knew that she was footling breech. So I'd been trying for weeks to get her to flip, and she just wouldn't. And so I called the midwife. I was going to have a hospital birth with a midwife. And I was like, my water broke. And she said, well, great. Is the fluid clear? Is anything coming out? And I said, no, but she's footling breech. And she was like, oh, honey, I'm sorry. Come on in. We'll get your cesarean. So I went into the hospital. My water broke at 8 p.m. She was born at 10:35. It was pretty quick. And I didn't get to see her right away. They took her. She came out crying. She was fine, but this was almost 17 years ago, and there was no skin-to-skin in the OR.
No.
There was none of that. I didn't get to hold her until she had been bathed and was swaddled and the hat on and everything. And I remember thinking, there has got to be a better way to do this. And that's actually what first started getting me thinking, I want to be a doula. I want to help change this. So she was perfect. Just this sweet little thing. And people would stop me on the street talking about what a beautiful baby she was. Big blue eyes and tons of dark hair, like your color, Naya. Just
really?
Dark hair and these big blue eyes. And I remember when she was about 2 months old, just having this feeling that she's not going to be here for very long. And I was like, oh, that's just my anxiety. You know, she's fine. She's healthy. She's great. And she was. And then in that summer, so Jeremy graduated in May, and we were living in Lawrence, Kansas. He went to KU, Rock Chalk Jayhawk. Always have to give my little shout out. And then we went into the suburbs of Kansas City. And he was looking for a job, couldn't find a job in his degree, so he was working as a contractor and just doing side stuff. And we went to New Orleans, and it was the best trip ever. Like, he was working all night redoing this shoe store, and I was, Emma and I would sleep, and then we'd get up and we'd go do stuff during the day. She was 7 months old, and we'd go do things during the day, and she was just the sweetest age. She was crawling, but she wasn't like needing to be down all the time. Still happy on my hip in the sling, and we would just walk around and do things, and it was really a magical week. And I look back on that week often with such fondness, and I'm so grateful I had that time to make those little memories with her that I wouldn't have otherwise. And I was really starting to dive into what it would look like to be a childbirth educator and a doula, knowing that's what I wanted to do. And so beginning of August, I was really starting to, build my reading list in Amazon, and I knew my program I wanted to do, and I was ready to do it. And I was going to start that fall. So on August 23rd, it was just a normal day. I went to Weight Watchers that morning with her. She crawled around the floor and had dirt under her nails from the nasty floor, and her knees were dirty, and playing with people's water bottles and all the things. And it was my in-laws' 30th anniversary. And so we decided to go over to their house and see them. And Jeremy's sister was in town. And so we were going to go see everybody. And so we went over there. And it was just, normal day. She was eating Cheerios, and my father-in-law was like, oh, I got to get those plug covers for the outlet so she doesn't stick her fingers in there now that she's crawling. And I'm like, oh, yeah, good idea. So there's a secondhand store up in Kansas City that I really love, and they brought all their winter clothes that day. And so my mother-in-law was like, well, let's go shopping and get Emma some stuff for the winter. I was like, oh, yay, I'm so excited. So I nursed her. And she nursed for an hour, which at 8 months old, that's not what they do anymore. Right. And I was like, you are crazy today. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
So she nursed for an hour, and then I went to go lay her down, and she just would not settle. Finally got her to go to sleep. And my mother-in-law and I left. And Jeremy and his dad were both at home. And Jeremy was in the garage working on the lawnmower, and his dad was downstairs on the computer playing hearts, as he does. And we went and we got some really cute clothes, and like a little winter coat and everything. We came back, and I walked in, and I said, I'm going to go check on Emma. And my father-in-law said, oh, I just did like 3 minutes ago. She was fine. And I remember thinking in my head 2 things. One, I have to not go up there so he knows I trust him. And 2, if anything happens to her, I'll never forgive myself. Like at the same time, those thoughts. And so I was getting clothes out and I was showing him, and my mother-in-law went upstairs to go to the bathroom, and she came down holding Emma. And she was like, Kim, something's wrong with Emma. I found her like this. And at first I was like, oh, what happened, baby? And I grabbed her and I looked at her. I was like, whoa, that's not my baby. She was gone. And I screamed for Jeremy, and he came in, and my father-in-law called 911, and Jeremy and I are doing CPR on her until they could get there. And then it was kind of a blur, but I knew she was gone. I knew she was gone. I knew she wasn't coming back. And it was a blow. I was 26.
Wow.
And yeah, I was like, I'm the oldest 26-year-old I know. We went to the hospital, and I remember leaving the neighborhood, and I was sitting in the front of the ambulance, and these little kids are standing there looking at the ambulance, like little kids love ambulances. And this little girl's like waving at me, and I was like, oh, not today. Don't wave at me right now. And got to the hospital, and the doctor came in and told us that she was gone. Like, they tried, and there was nothing. And I remember throwing my shoe at the wall because I was really, really mad. And the social worker came in and said, so where do you want to bury your baby? I was like, I don't know. Jeremy didn't have a job yet. My parents live in Utah. My oldest brother and his wife were our best friends. And they had moved on Tuesday, and this was now Saturday. On Tuesday, they had moved to Utah, and this is now Saturday. So, like, our biggest support system was now gone. My sister was in Utah. Jeremy's mom and dad grew up in Utah, and, like, he had family, and we're like, okay, we don't know where we're going to end up in this world, but we know there's always going to be somebody in Utah who can take care of her. So we decided to bury her in the town where my parents lived. So my sister picked out her plot. My father-in-law picked out her casket. I remember flying on the airplane, knowing that she was in the the cargo section, looking at Jeremy saying, if the plane went down right now, that'd be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this was 2003, so this is still a real thing that is in our minds after 2000.
9/11.
Yeah, after 9/11, it's like, oh, that's a possibility.
It could
The plane
happen.
could go down. So
But it's also, that's a very valid thought that someone grieving would have.
yeah, let's just be done. I'm done. I don't want to do this. This hurts too much, And at this point, when we were on the airplane, she'd been gone for 2 days. So, lactation consultant, what's happening to my boobs?
Yes.
With a breastfeeding baby who
Yes.
doesn't eat solids yet.
No.
Milk into my armpits. And I already have oversupply issues, so milk into my armpits.
You're
And-
miserable.
Yeah.
It's just a constant reminder.
Yeah, it is. I remember I actually called the Leche League because I would go to La Leche League all the time. So I called my leader, and I told her what happened. And she was like, oh, honey, okay, go get some cabbage leaves. Let's get you some sage tincture and some parsley tincture. And you could bind, but I really wouldn't recommend it. And they actually brought me a beautiful plant, and they were so sweet. But the cabbage leaves were the thing that like stuck in my brain. And so I sent my father-in-law to get cabbage leaves, and he came back and he said he went through the grocery store looking at the cabbage, palming it.
Oh, to make sure.
I need a decut cabbage. And it was like the first thing that made me laugh.
Yeah.
And it was just so funny. I mean, like little things like that.
Yeah.
We would just laugh about. Anyway, so we got there, and really long story. I didn't do anything. I couldn't do anything. My sister picked out her plot. My mom and my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law and my mom and my sister all dressed her for her funeral. The first time I saw her after holding her in the hospital, because I got to hold her after she died, and clean up her face and cut some hair and all the things. But the first time I held her after that was after, she'd already been embalmed and all of that. And I remember just thinking, that's just not my baby. Because, they just, if you've seen a dead body, they don't look like the person that was in it. Their soul is so much. But I felt her everywhere I went. And I felt all of my kids. I remember I had a really spiritual experience holding her while we were waiting before the visitation began in the mortuary, just holding her. Jeremy and I are sitting there. And I felt the room just full of people.
Wow.
Of my ancestors and of my children. And Seth, my oldest now, my second oldest, but my oldest now, I remember he was standing right behind me. And when he was born, I looked at him and I was like, oh, that's you.
Whoa.
I remember you.
Wow.
And I remember that, just feeling that spirit just fiercely protective, which is him to a T. So, yeah, that's the long and short of it. I went on to have 5 more kiddos. I got pregnant a month after she died because I didn't know I was fertile. Grief sex for the win.
You have to do something to not feel sad.
Yeah, you do. You do. And, you still have needs and you still need to do things.
Right.
And we were still newlyweds. I mean, by the time we hit our 2nd anniversary, we'd had a baby, buried a baby, and found out we were pregnant with another baby.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. So
as you were talking, I was thinking a lot about the work that you do now, and how did you get to a place where you could do that? What got you there?
So many other people showing me it was possible. So we went to a support group after Emma died called Compassionate Friends, and I don't even know if it's still around. I think it probably is. I haven't been in many, many years, but they were really amazing for me. It was for people who've lost a child of any age. So the first thing I did when she died was I called SHARE, which is another support group for children, for people who've lost a baby, but it's for miscarriage and stillbirth. And they told me, oh, your baby lived? We're not for you. And there wasn't anything for anyone who'd lost a baby who lived. If your baby was alive, sorry.
Yeah.
So we found compassionate. Yeah, exactly. We found Compassionate Friends, which was great, except sometimes we were there listening to people whose adult kids committed suicide. Or there was one whose adult child was murdered. And it was just, holding space for everybody, but realizing this is not the same. But there was one woman whose son had died of cancer. And I remember talking to her, and her son had been gone for 4 years. And at this point, Emma had been gone for 6 months. And I was like, there's no way I'll live 4 years. I won't live that long. I can't even imagine 4 years without her. I'm almost at 16 years. My midwife, when I was pregnant with Seth, she has 4 biological children. She has had countless miscarriages. She has 22 total children. She has adopted children from all over the world with different abilities. And some of them died before she was able to get them home.
Oh, wow.
So she had a very unique perspective of grief. And it was so helpful for me. And there was one time that I was just talking to her and I was just crying. And she goes, don't you wish there was an epidural for your heart? And I was like, yes, you get it. You get it. And then there was another woman whose name is Monica. And she's such a lady. She had a daughter who had spinal muscular atrophy, and it's a terminal illness. And her daughter was at the hospital, at Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake. And so we were living in Salt Lake at the time now. So we moved to Utah after she died because I was like, I can't be in Kansas without her.
Or by yourself without your support there.
Yeah. I needed my people. I needed my baby. I needed to be able to go to the cemetery every day and see her. So, and it worked out well because Jeremy went to grad school there and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so Monica's daughter was at Primary Children's and she had a 7-month-old baby and who was breastfeeding. And she was like, I don't know what to do because I need to be able to be with Talia when she needs me, but I also need to be able to nurse Colin when he needs to nurse. And I was like, I'll take him. Because I was pregnant with Seth. My arms were so empty.
Yeah.
And were so aching. And so I got to love on her sweet baby, take him up to her to nurse when he needed to, and then she would come and stay the night at our house. And we did this for like 2 weeks. And she and I had so many conversations about death. And the difference between me having to plan on the fly and having no idea this is coming, this very traumatic, I mean, death is traumatic any way you roll the dice. But it was very interesting, our conversations that, you know, she's planning this green funeral and she knows exactly what her daughter's funeral is going to look like. And me, I was like, oh, I wish I would have known about that. I wouldn't have embalmed her. I would have put her in a pine casket and had people decorate it. And that's really cool. And then her watching me go through my own grief. And then when her daughter did die, I was able to support her knowing what that's like to actually like go home from the hospital empty-handed. And so it was just these little things, these people who I often said they held my hand as I walked the rocky path of grief. And I promised myself as I was doing that when I was able, I would do the same. So right away, I'd been online forever. I'm like one of the OG bloggers back in the day. And I started a support group online. And it was LDS infant loss. So for people who were of the Mormon faith who'd lost babies, let's come and talk about it. Because the Mormon faith has a very unique view on it that even though your baby has died, you will see your baby again and you will raise your baby again. When Jesus comes to earth and everybody's resurrected, your baby will be resurrected at that age and you will get to raise them in a perfect world. And it's really a lovely thought. And I had a lot of people trying to comfort me with that. I was like, yeah, that's not comforting. Unless your skills at resurrection are on point, you're not going to do anything for me today, so shut up. And I actually said that to Jeremy's aunt one time. I was like, you know, Aunt Sue, unless you're like great at resurrection, doesn't do a thing to empty my breast or fill my arms today. So thanks. Anyway, so I started this group, and I had Emma's whole story on there. And I don't share how she died anymore because I had it there. And about 18 months after I'd had it up there, this woman comes up to me at church, and she was like, oh my gosh, Kim. I said, what? She goes, oh, I read this story online about this baby that died. And she starts to tell me my story. And I said, oh, that was me. She's like, no. And she continues. And I said, that was me. She goes, no. And keeps going. And I said, Jenny, that was me. That was my baby.
Yes.
And she gave me this look of disgust and goes, oh, and turned around and walked away.
What the fuck?
Right? Seriously.
Yeah.
I went home. I mean, I found Jeremy. I was in tears.
Of course.
Yeah, I grabbed Seth. Jeremy and I went home. I took the website down. I've never told anybody the story again unless I really know them and I really trust them. That's it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
It is. And there was a time when I was telling everybody I knew. And there was another woman at La Leche League who was like, you're lucky they didn't call CPS. And keeps going on and on and on. And my friend Vanessa, who she is just a tough Eastern girl. And she walks up to her and she goes, her baby died. Walk away.
Right.
I was like, thanks, Vanessa.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, people just say stupid things. But that's what's got me into this point where I really love supporting parents as they go through not only loss. Like, I don't love supporting through loss. I don't think anybody does. But I feel like I'm uniquely equipped to support through loss. And so I do. What I really love is supporting through a rainbow baby. So if you don't know what a rainbow baby is, it's the idea that after a storm comes a rainbow. And so it's the baby that comes after a loss. And those are the ones I love. The look of those moms and thus far it's been moms who've had miscarriages or stillbirth. And the look that they have when their baby is placed on their chest and that baby's warm and moving and latches. And they're just, I'm really going to take my baby home. And it's amazing. And, and walking that path with them and holding their hand as they grieve through their pregnancy and as they grieve after the baby's born, because there's a lot of guilt that comes when you have this living baby and you're missing your baby that's not here, and you're comparing them, and you're like, oh, this is what it would be like. And, and what did I do wrong that I didn't get this the first time? And, just having somebody normalizing and being like, yeah, I get it. That's really hard. And that's really normal. And you're not alone.
Did you navigate anxiety? Seth was your next baby. With, was that harder parenting him? Like, were you afraid that something bad was going to happen? Like, can you speak to that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. I didn't think I would because, when I had Emma, I was very confident. Obviously, I'd been an aunt for 15 years at that point or whatever. Not 15 years, but for a long time. And so I was like, I got this. And when Seth was born, I could not walk while holding him. I was terrified I was going to drop him. I couldn't leave him, at all. And there was one time when he was probably about 4 months old that Jeremy had convinced me to go to the gym. He was like, just go. It'll be fine. It's a mile from our house. He said, I'm here. It'll be fine. I'm like, but you were there. And I just stopped. And he just, the pained look on his face. I'm like, I'm sorry. He's like, I know. It's okay. So I went. And I got as far as the parking lot. And I turned around and I came home and I was just hyperventilating. I was like, I just can't. He's like, it's okay. It's okay. It's fine. Take it when you can. The first year is really hard for me with my babies. She was 8 months and 8 days old when she died. So when I get to 8 months and 9 days old, I would have a celebration. And it's just, but yeah, I had anxiety, really bad anxiety with Seth. With Amelia, I thought I would because it was another girl, but I didn't. It was not as bad with Amelia or Libby or Elliot, but Zachary, my youngest, he is the spitting image of Emma. Leilani Rogers was my birth photographer, and when he was born, she looked at him and she goes, "Ooh, that looks like Emma." I was like, "Yup, he does." Except, she had really dark hair, and he's a super blondie. Otherwise, they could be like
twins.
Almost. Yeah. They just, oh, wow. And so I had really, really bad anxiety after he was born. And that lasted for a good 2 years. So, yeah.
Are there, I'm sorry, I'm like, all these questions just keep coming to me. We're not even looking at the page.
Your therapist brain is going.
But I'm just wondering, like, are there ever any families that, like, have you been triggered and you've had to, like, scale back or
step out of the room?
Yeah,
or
like, how have you navigate, or what has that been like?
Not yet. But I know that it will come because it's a numbers game. I just attended my 79th birth.
Wow.
Yeah. It was twins, so I got to count it as two. 78 and 79. And I know that it's just a matter of time until there's either a stillbirth or somebody's baby dies. And Chelsea, my business partner, and I talk about this frequently, that we're like, we know it's a numbers game and we know it's a matter of time. And when it happens, we'll deal with it. And that's one of the reasons that I really love working with a partner, because we can share that emotional load and the physical load of it. I did work for a smaller collective a few years ago, and we had a client who had a stillbirth. And she found out at 41 weeks that her baby was gone. And there were 4 doulas on the team. And we each took turns going in and sitting. It was like sitting Shiva. We each took turns going in and being with them. And her husband told me later, he was like, you guys each came in at different times and none of us coordinated it with each other. We just showed up when our day allowed. And he said, you each came at the exact time we needed a change in energy. And you each brought the energy we needed. And
that's beautiful.
Yeah, it really was. And then I was lucky enough to be able to be there when they had their second baby, and just not a dry eye in the room. But yeah, I'm waiting for that day, and I know it will happen. And I just pray that I have the strength to be able to not make it about me. And that's the key when you're supporting somebody in grief, is it's not about you and it's about them. And just, I know what it felt like for me. How does that feel for you? And those are my questions I usually ask. Like, what does that feel like for you?
Yeah.
Man, I haven't thought about it. I am not anywhere near 79 births, but
You haven't been doing it for as long as I have either.
but I haven't thought. That thought has never come in my head of like it's a numbers game. I have not experienced a loss with a client yet. But wow.
Yeah, but that's also the way that I realize often my brain works differently than others. I don't always realize that it's not the way other people think. Like, where is Zachary? I don't know where he is. Oh, he's probably in his room dead. Or somebody's sleeping longer than I think they should. Oh, I'm going to go check on them. I'm not going to send a kid because if they're dead, I don't want the kid to find them.
See it.
You know, and Jeremy and I were talking about that one night, and he goes, oh, yeah, I do that all the time. When I go in to check on the little boys at night, I steel myself for if one of them is gone. And it's different now. I don't think it as much with my teenagers. As they get older and they're less needy physically, I don't feel that as much. But the little ones, oh, yeah. And I didn't realize that wasn't normal until I talked to somebody else, and they're like, I don't ever think that.
Well, actually, we were on the Mom Village. We were asking each other, like, if we were on a dating site, like, questions. I don't remember what the question was, but it was like, what is something you think about all the time? And I was like, how my family's going to die. Like, that is one of my anxieties, and I have not experienced that. So I would say that some people that have not experienced the loss have that thought, because I often...
But I'm glad I'm not alone.
No.
But I'm
so glad you think that too.
I do have that thought sometimes. And
Yeah.
Similarly, like if, even with my kids being sick right now, there's been a couple times the last 2 weeks where I'm like, I wake up and I'm like, am I going to find one of them dead?
Sickness is my big trigger with
Yeah.
my kids. If they fall down and they get hurt, or if they have a fever and they're sick, then forget about it. I'm going up and checking on them a lot and put the baby monitor in there and, all of that.
They sleep on my floor.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I just go sleep in their room. That's
yeah,
usually what it
that's-
ends up being.
We co-sleep when they're sick.
Oh, yeah. They get a little mat in my room. And I mean, even Amelia, who is your babysitter and 13, last time she was sick, I was like, just come sleep in my room. She's like, Mom, I'm fine.
No.
I'm like, okay, well, at least let's put you on the pull-out sofa, and then you can call me on your phone if you need me. And I'm like, turn my phone on super high volume, like I'm on call for a birth. Like, if you need me, you call me. Yeah.
I was going to ask that too. Like, what was different about your grieving and Jeremy? Like, was there a difference? Did you guys have any times where there was conflict around that? Like, can you talk about that more?
Yeah. I'm very vocal. I mean, you guys know that. Anybody who's listening to this now knows that. I talk a lot. I share. I would write. I started blogging, and I would write about my grief, and I was very open, and I tried to get him to grieve the way I was grieving. I was like, talk to me, tell me, let's go buy you a journal so you can write everything down, and trying to get him to open up, because he's a very quiet guy. He's an introvert. He's an engineer. He thinks everything through, and he's very logical, and that's just how he is. And I love that about him. He's very much the yin to my yang. And when he didn't grieve the way I did, the way I thought he should, that caused problems. And we would get really upset with each other. And I was like, you don't even miss her. And he's like, you don't know what I think. You don't know what I feel. I'm like, because you won't tell me. I mean, just these big things. And remember, we hadn't known each other that long.
Yeah.
So we had never gone through conflict before. Like, this was the first real conflict we ever had. And it was like baptism by fire. But I remember one time we drove into the cemetery, and so she's buried in Kaysville, Utah, and it's a beautiful cemetery, and she's at the top of a hill that my brother sent me a picture a couple years ago. He was out there visiting of the sunset. And I was like, oh, the sunset from my baby's grave. It's beautiful. It's just this gorgeous spot. But people like to go there to run. run through the cemetery. And I have a real big problem with that. But they will go and they'll run through the cemetery. Memorial Day, you'll find people having picnics in the cemetery. And yeah, I'm like, oh, come on.
Like with someone they lost?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah,
Okay, that's better.
But I mean, they're having picnics on a grave of somebody they lost, but then their kids are running around and climbing on the other graves.
yes.
And
Okay.
like I taught my kids from a very young age, the only grave you're allowed to climb on is your sister's.
Right.
That's it. And now my sister's husband is buried right by Emma's. So when we go out to visit this summer, I'll tell them they can climb on Uncle Bruce or they can climb on Emma. That's it. That's all. Those are the only two people you can climb on in the cemetery because it's respect.
Right.
So I remember one time we're driving into the cemetery and there are these people who are walking or running or something, and he just started getting so angry. And we're in the car, windows are up, thank heavens, and he is cussing them out. And I was like, what is your problem? He's like, these goddamn motherfuckers, what are they doing in there? Don't they realize we're here to see our baby? And I was like, oh. That's how your grief is manifesting. Okay, I got you. That's cool.
Yeah.
And that's his grief. That's how he does it. And it's different now, even almost 16 years in. It's more of a quiet grief. It's just always there. And I'll look at him sometimes and I'll be like, yeah. He's like, yeah. We miss her. Or if we're watching a TV show and a baby dies. He and I are both a puddle.
Yeah.
I won't give any spoilers, but when he saw Endgame, he was a puddle.
Endgame.
Avengers.
Oh, duh.
Avengers Endgame.
I was
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I'm not going to give
I
any
have
spoilers,
seen it.
but I'm just saying like that. I mean, and my kids were like, Dad's crying? I mean, he was like,
Sobbing.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just little things that will trigger it for us. And so it's a quiet grief now. But yeah, it's very different. And I remember somebody, maybe my therapist or somebody said, grief is like a snake. It's going to come get you when you least expect it. And I call that sneaky grief. You don't know when it's going to hit, how it's going to hit, what you're going to be doing, what's going to trigger it, nothing, everything, who knows?
Yeah.
And it just hits out of nowhere. And it does for both of us, but just in different ways.
I see that with my husband who lost his mom when he was really young, and just random things will set it off. She was an avid cook and baker, and sometimes walking through like the baking aisle at Target and looking at Pyrex plates and cupcake tins and things like that will just set him off. And he'll get really emotional, and I'll just say, let's go to a different part of the store. And some days he'll say okay, and other days he wants to kind of sit in it and feel it and then move on. And so, like you said, it sneaks up when you least expect it.
Yeah. I remember a month after she died, I was at Walmart, and so she was our little bug. We didn't know if she was going to be a boy or a girl, so we decorated in bugs. And so we accidentally found out she was a girl. So then we decorated in ladybugs. And she wore ladybugs all the time, like on everything. That was her thing. There's even a ladybug on her headstone. And so she died in August, and so it was September. So, of course, all the Halloween costumes are out, and I'm at Walmart. And, of course, I just go to the baby section because that's what I'd been doing for, over a year at this point. And there was a ladybug costume. And I grabbed it, and it was 9-month, which would have fit her perfect. And I grabbed it, and I sat down, and I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, just sitting on the floor in Walmart, just crying, holding this costume that I ended up buying that none of my kids ever wore because it wouldn't fit any of them at that age. But it doesn't matter. I needed it.
You needed it. Exactly.
So that was that same thing, like just sitting in it and like, yep, this hurts.
Feeling it.
Sit here.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is making me think two things. Is one, we were talking about vulnerability, and I just had this image of you in Walmart buying this, and how every checker is like, how are you doing today? And how, like...
Oh, is this for your baby? Like making small talk
anything
about
like,
it.
and like, most of the time we're just like, I'm fine. But how conversations and relationship happen so much differently when you're like, actually, I'm not okay. This is for my daughter who died, and she doesn't get to wear this, and
I said that.
Good.
I would tell everybody, especially when I was pregnant with Seth, and they go, oh, is this your first? I'm like, no, it's my second, but my first died. She was 8 months old. And I mean, I would tell everybody, I'm like, this is how she died. Like to check her at Joann, I'm buying clothes. And she's like, okay. Deer in the headlights. And so I had to reel it in a little bit and decide who deserved to know anything. And I still do that. If I meet somebody, I'm at the store and I've got, a couple of my kids and they're like, oh, how many kids do you have? Or, oh, your hands are full. And I'm like, oh, well, I've got 6.
Right.
They're like, 6? How old are they? And I'm like, oh, 16, 16 and a half, 15, 13, 11, 8, and 6. They're never going to see me again. They're never going to meet my kids. They don't know. And it allows me to live in that fantasy for a minute. So I love it. Yeah, I just decide who gets to know and who doesn't.
And that's the second part, is that one, like, it's so different to enter, like, vulnerability creates more connection, but then also part of what prompted us to be like, oh my God, come talk to us, was you had posted on social media about people don't want to talk about death, certainly not death of a child, and how you've tried to get your voice out there and share about your story, and you've even been denied. And so I just wanted to see if you wanted to speak about a little bit of, why is that, and how can we shift that, or what can we do to be more supportive of welcoming that conversation and giving you what you need.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that you have me here today says volumes. Because like I said on that, like, I've offered many times over the years to different people. There's a podcast that was just starting, and I submitted to tell my stories and never got a response. And I was like, okay, cool. And I've even met the person who does the podcast and told them, I was like, oh, hey, I applied to be on the show. And they're like, oh, okay, great. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I think the reason people don't want to talk about it is because it's so scary. And if you're willing to talk about it and be vulnerable about it, I can't talk, then it opens you up to the possibility it could happen to you. And then you have to sit with those feelings of, oh, I know somebody whose child died, not somebody who had a miscarriage. Because that is horrible, and it is so painful, and it is so hard. But it is just as common as people who lose children. And no one talks about the other part. There's a woman that I've become friends with on social media, and she lives in one of the Carolinas. And her son died. He was 19 months old, and he drowned. And she's been so open with her grief, and she's received a lot of backlash from people. And I keep telling her, just keep talking. Just keep talking. Because that is what you need. That is healing for you. And you don't know how many people you're helping because you just keep talking. I sat on a panel for so I was a blogger for 10 years. And I primarily wrote about just life. This was before all the niche blogging that there is now. This is when we all just like, I have babies and I need to talk to other humans. And we would actually like leave comments for each other. And it was this beautiful network. And I was asked to speak at Type A conference, which is, it happens at this time it was in Asheville, North Carolina. And interestingly enough, the woman who started it and puts it on was in my due date forum on about.com when I was pregnant with Emma.
Oh, wow.
So we knew each other then, kind of lost contact after Emma died, and then found each other again through blogging. I was like, hey. So she opened up an entire panel on blogging grief, which I don't think has ever been done since. And she had me, and she had another woman who was pregnant with twins and had to have a late-term abortion to save her life. And another mom whose daughter died when she was 11 months old of respiratory failure because she was a preemie. And we were talking about what that looks like to blog your grief and to be so open and so vulnerable with it. And we were really excited about this panel. And there were only a handful of people in the room. And it just...
What a blow.
Yeah. Because people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to admit the fact that it could happen to them. But the problem is, when it happens to somebody you know and you love, if you haven't listened to these kinds of stories, you don't know what to say. And then you end up saying, oh, well, at least you'll see them again. Or at least you can have more babies. Or at least...
You're in a better place.
Yes. Oh, God. I had somebody say it to me, and I was like, really? A better place than my arms?
Yeah.
Really?
Then with
I
her
don't-
mother? Yeah.
I don't think that's possible. Like, this is the best place for my baby, is in my arms with the milk that I'm producing. And yeah, don't even give me that. And so people don't know what to say because they don't ever open themselves up to the conversation. So I'm really hoping that your listeners have not stopped listening at this point. If you're still here, kudos to you, because I know this is a hard thing to listen to and to think about. But I think just if it happens to somebody you know, just asking, what does that feel like for you? And listening and just being there and not trying to make them feel better with platitudes and just never saying it's okay, except it's okay to cry and it's okay to be sad and it's okay to feel whatever you're going to feel.
Yeah. And so I know that we talked a little bit about what not to say and what to say, but if there's anything that you would want our listeners to kind of take away from this episode about how to possibly support a family that has had a loss of a child, what would it be?
Remember the kiddo. Say their name. Remember the important days. Remember the day that they were born. Remember the day they died. Reach out on those days. The first 2 weeks, you are flooded with people helping. Everybody's there. Everybody's doing things because you've got a funeral to plan or a wake or whatever you're doing. You've got something. And then after about 2 weeks, everybody kind of trickles away and goes back to their lives, and you're left with this really shitty reality that, you don't have anything. Your baby's gone. Your kiddo's gone. I remember we went out to Utah for 2 weeks. We came home, and one of my very dear friends had come over while I was gone and had cleaned my apartment, had stocked my refrigerator with food. I had an Ann Geddes calendar, and she replaced it with a different calendar so I wouldn't have to see all the baby pictures.
Right.
But she left Emma's things out. Like, she didn't touch them because there were books that Emma had pulled off the bookshelf that morning, and I kept them there. Like, I hadn't touched them yet, and she left it. And just little things like that. I took to throwing potatoes because I was really angry and I needed to throw something because I was just, And I remember it was the day after she died, and I was looking around my kitchen just shaking with anger, and I'm looking at all these things. I'm like, oh, my logical brain's like, oh, you don't have to clean that up. You're going to be really sad if you break that. You never see that again. And I had a potato, and I just chucked it so hard and it exploded. I was like, oh, that feels good. And so we were at my mom and dad's, and I would go out at night, and I would throw potatoes in the cul-de-sac. And my mom's neighbors went out, and they would clean up the potatoes every night after I did that. Like, it's such a little thing, but it meant so much. So just little things that you don't think would mean anything. Remember, like I said, remembering them, talking about them, asking, tell me about your kiddo. Tell me about your child, or I really see your child in your eyes. Or, hey, I saw a rainbow today and it made me think of you. Just little things. I always say don't buy flowers because they die, and it's just another reminder.
Right.
Buy a plant. Buy a tree that they can plant in their yard if they have a yard. We had some friends buy us a tree, and we planted it in my mom and dad's yard. And they've since moved. My brother lives there now.
Okay.
So it's in his
Still in the
yard.
family.
Yeah. And I actually went and I looked on Google Earth one day to make sure he didn't tear it down. I'm like, good, it's still there. Even though he hates the placement of it, and he tells me that all the time. I'm like, sorry.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We're almost out of time, but I did really want to ask about this because it was something I learned was the phrase keeping tiny humans alive. I've definitely been guilty of saying
Yep,
that.
same.
And you recently shared how hurtful that is. So I just wanted to say it out loud for everyone else to hear, and just any other thoughts you want to share about it.
Yeah, it's, people will say, oh, especially second times parents. This is where I hear it the most, is as a birth doula, I'm in the hospital a lot, and I hear nurses saying, oh, well, you kept one alive. This will be easy. Or, you already know how to keep a baby alive. This is going to be a walk in the park.
Right.
And every time I'm like, oh, but I couldn't keep one alive. So what does that say about me? And it's just being aware of our language. And so instead of saying you've kept one alive, or, if your goal today is keep your tiny humans alive, it's your goal today is to have a good day.
Right.
Is to do the best you can. Is, you are doing an amazing job as a mom. And you could even say that to somebody who's lost a baby. You've done an amazing job as a mom. And that's it. You don't have to keep going into I posted that, and even my business partner was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I say that all the time. I'm like, I know. I know. And I don't usually say anything, but it just hit me one day the wrong way. And I'm like,
I'm glad
Facebook
you said something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only way that, we can create conversation around it. And words are super powerful. We talk about that all the time. And, that's not... I hate that when we have conversation about changing language, there's always this backlash of you're being too sensitive and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, no, like if you reel back what this conversation is someone just told you that something you said causes pain. So let's listen and do something different.
Yeah. That's all there is to
why
it.
is that a bad thing to do?
Yeah, it's not.
So I appreciated it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I've worked to shift my language because I definitely have said it many times.
Same.
Yeah.
Probably posted memes about it.
Yes.
So I'm sorry if you see
No,
them.
it's fine. And like I said, 90% of the time it doesn't bug me. There's that 10% where I'm like, oy. And it's just, it's, better, you do better.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you for coming on and sharing.
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
You rock.
Thanks.
Well, we'll put links to how you can get a hold of Kim, learn more about Austin Doula Care, and anything else in our show notes, and also on our website. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you. I love you guys.
If the Top Knot Squad's content makes you laugh, nod in agreement, or makes you feel less alone, we'd love your support in the cost of producing this podcast. Visit patreon.com/TopKnotSquad to learn more about our budget-friendly sponsorship tiers and how you can help ensure that TKS has a future. Every little bit helps.
If you like what you hear, then be sure to click the subscribe button in your podcast app. While you're there, leave us a review. You can find us on social media. Just search for Top Knot Squad. We welcome your feedback and love making new friends.